Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Rugby Union podcast with your host Mark Kennedy. Joined again this week by Liam O'Brien. And in this part of the podcast, we'll review the URC action from round 5 and also preview the key fixtures from round 6 of the tournament.
I suppose, Liam, we can depart from the Test match series here to looking at the URC round 5. You were in Thome Park last Saturday night in the wind and the rain. But what a great performance, I thought, off Munster Rugby, backs against the wall. We had fears, we had concerns, we had apprehensions, but my God, this team, backs against the wall wise, they did produce a great performance after a bit of a sluggish start against the Bulls.
Yeah, it was exactly what was required, wasn't it? I mean, we're struggling to see if we could actually win last week. Never mind get a bonus point win, but to do that and playing well is just superb. And all the parts came together, and also what was, I suppose, really revealing was how good the young players were. The likes of a Dogbo, who to me, the guy is he looks like, I suppose, Mario Itoje, He's just savage to be 19 stone, 19 years old, and his physique is just phenomenal. And he had a really good game. Obviously, Gavin Coombs got his 2 tries, and that was really good as well. In the first half, that kind of settled us, But I like the fact that Casey early doors, only a few minutes in, that Casey went for that break off the scrum, and I think that's really what set the tone for me. And he was just held up, even as he was, brave guy, to do it, and so that's what I liked in terms of the try. Now, obviously, we had ourselves, Munster had, the early game, the first 20 minutes, it was 3-3, but we kicked on from there with those 2 Coombs tries. And the guy is so hard to stop when he gets ahead of steam, that 5 meters out. Almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. It was a sluggish opening 20 minutes, but I suppose there was a marked improvement, I thought, in the physicality, the line speed, everything about it, Liam, from Munster was a little bit different. It felt different, even though Bulls were enjoying their fair share of possession, particularly in that first 20 minutes. Greta Goosen gets the early penalty from a high tackle, 3-0. So, but again, Munster's composure, they built phases, they won penalties, they got into the Bulls' half, and I think we've kind of seen it in previous weeks where Munster have had territory but really haven't put points on the board, but it certainly wasn't the case last weekend. And as you say, those 2 quick tries, were just key, really. And I suppose Carberry as well. I know we've been a little bit critical on this podcast in previous weeks about him, but backs against the wall, he came in at 10. I thought he had a very efficient game. He's just all around game management. He synced up play very well between backs and forwards, and his kicking was on point off tee. So I think from that perspective, an awful lot of positives probably for Graham Rowntree, particularly given that first half performance, 17-3 up, with the gander was up, the 12,000 crowd in Thome Park was really buoyed up, and the team were really up for it. So all in all, I think he ticked an awful lot of boxes for Graham Rowntree.
Yeah, I get it, but with Carberry, he ran the ball, he ran with intent, and he was posing a threat, I mean, he made like 48 meters, 9 carries, 34 passes. It means that he wasn't just putting boot to ball just for the sake of it. And he had a smashing 50-22 actually
yep.
in that game, as well, which shows his range of kicking. But yeah, I thought he was really on point. And Craig Casey alongside him with 54 passes, Again, it was passing. Munster passed in this game. That was a crucial part about it, and that gets your forwards, which do the heavy yards, into the game and get momentum over the gain line. And Munster are definitely going to get over the gain line in this game compared to other games. And so it was really excellent to see a Dogbo obviously as well. Ty Byrne was prominent. And yeah, even I must say that having the option of Crowley when he came in at half time, having him dovetailing with Carberry is something else that maybe Munster have to think about for games going forward as well.
Definitely. I think that's certainly an option because Crowley did come in at half time. And, he kind of continued to show his versatility, just literally in the back three. His kicking game is phenomenal, as we know, which has always been good. But I suppose going back to the pack, we had apprehension about how the Munster front five would handle the Bulls. But to be fair, we've talked about Idogbo, phenomenal talent, and really came to the fore in Thomond Park on his debut. But we have to give kudos here to Jean Klein. 23 tackles. I thought he was a monster during the game. In all facets of play. Lino, I thought was much improved as well here, Liam, from him. But Klein, I thought his work rate was superb along with Dogbo. And really, Bulls had to make changes at half time. They just weren't happy in terms of the cohesion here. But Lockman's try, I suppose, prime example of never giving up on a lost situation. Carberry's hopeful kick in behind and Smith making a bit of a hash of it from the Bulls and Lockman there to gratefully touch down. And I think that really gave another lease of life to this game for Munster Rugby. And it really didn't look back, given the try from Tyburn. Great body position to crash over there on 61 minutes to secure that bonus point.
Yeah, but I mean, as it was early doors, it was just after half time for Lockman's try. And that gave us then an absolute sniff then for the rest of the game of getting the bonus point. And then, of course, the Bulls in discipline, that's kind of silly, kind of push and hit on Crowley. And they were down to 14. And yeah, I suppose we were kind of loose in the two tries we get. And it was like basically turnovers and run the length of the pitch sort of thing for the Bulls. But really, in terms of our defensive system, it held up well. So that you couldn't count. It was kind of funny. You couldn't fault Munster defensively, really. Just a bit a bit loose, but the defensive system was not really breached, I suppose is the word, in that game. And yeah, Tyburn crashed over, and then to be there after 62 minutes to have the bonus point wrapped up was actually brilliant.
Yeah, completely agree. I suppose it just gives a lesson to Munster and probably to review it in video analysis, not to switch off, particularly in the breakdown ball presentation. 2 times, basically, ball was turned over, and Bulls really showing that South Africa clinical nature in terms of loose ball, creating something out of nothing. So I think that will be maybe a timely reminder for Munster Rugby kind of going forward in terms of that. But I thought breakdown work was much improved here, Liam, as well. From our perspective, we won 11 turnovers to Bulls 13. And I suppose, Gavin Coombs, we've talked about him, 2 tries, but again, very dangerous with ball in hand. He had 11 successful carries. And we criticised about line breaks last week in our stats in the podcast last week. Munster secured and had 3 clean breaks during the game, which I think really does bode well here. And Bulls usually a very stingy defence. The fact that we're able to create those clean breaks, I think maybe hopefully bodes well for upcoming fixtures.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we dominated, we outmuscled arguably the most physically dominant pack in the URC. So that how good is that? To know that we have it in the locker, I guess. And yeah, I mean, there are no slouches. They still had Del Reclo there. And they had Marcel Coetzee. So, but yeah, the most physically dominant forward was Gavin Coombs, and he certainly is what he brings is different than any other Irish back row, really.
He does bring that X factor with ball carrying, doesn't he, Liam? Throughout his career, his relatively young career, he's just had that, that X factor. I don't think he can train that. I think he just have it, and he's a phenomenal talent with ball in hand. And I think his other areas of game has really improved in terms of his offensive side of the game, particularly breakdown. There's an awful lot of upside still left in Gavin Coombs as well, which is great. But I suppose the result came at maybe a bit of a cost when the press conference for Munster Rugby ahead of the Leinster rugby game in the Aviva Stadium was, yesterday. It kind of sounded like a bit of a casualty list, really. Roman Salanoa suffered a head injury in the final play of the match, undergoing return to play protocols. Stephen Archer having a scan on an ankle injury. Calvin Nash was removed at half-time with a thigh injury. Edwin Adogbo, calf. Craig Casey, groin. Tyke Bergen, groin. Antoine Frisch managing a calf injury sustained on the Emerging Ireland Tour. And Patrick Campbell, fortunately now, is recovering from illness. Was unavailable for selection. So, I mean, we still do have a few long-term issues in terms of our squad, but the medical staff in Munster will be working flat out to get a few of these guys back for the Aviva Stadium showdown with Leinster.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at the list already, only a few games in the season, it's quite a substantial injury list, to be fair. And a lot of guys out long term as well. But yeah, I mean, like it's a pity because like I want to see Antoine Frisch, in a midfield combination for sure. And I to be honest, if he's available, I put him in next week and just see how it goes, and yeah, it's obviously Ty Byrne is our key guy. I think you just throw in all the youngsters, quite frankly, against Leinster, and see how we go. Because I suppose, look, definitely Ulster, we have to aim to get the full points there, and I think again Leinster, it's about being in that game right to the end, and asking questions of Leinster. And like Connacht last week, had an opportunity to turn them over, and probably should have. And Munster, look, have to go forward now after last week and just say, look, we can win as much games as we can over the rest of the season, and why not go and target Leinster?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, the Aviva Stadium, Saturday night, I think they've nothing to lose. Munster, the record kind of speaks for itself. 3 wins, Munster out of 15 fixtures with Leinster. It's not a good record, but I think you have to put in the young guys in here and just see how they, adapt and perform. Because we do have a key fixture against Ulster on the October 28th weekend to finish off this block of fixtures. I think that's a far more key game here for Munster Rugby to literally maybe end that block on a bit of a positive note. But yeah, I think they've nothing to lose in terms of this Leinster Rugby fixture here, Liam. I would look at the training paddock, see who's on form, and really do trust them and trust that they will execute the game plan. Leinster, admittedly, I suppose, weren't at their best against Connacht in the sports ground last Friday night. Line-out malfunctioned at an alarming rate. Young Murray from Connacht had a particularly good game, second row, disrupting there. But I suppose Leinster's inefficiencies, particularly in the cohesion aspect of attack, you have to admire their defensive performance. I'll throw a stat out for you, Liam. 123 tackles made by Leinster Rugby against Connacht. They missed only 2. Phenomenal effort from Leinster. And to keep Connacht Rugby scoreless in the sports ground in an Interpro, another great accomplishment. So I suppose Munster Rugby, their newfound confidence in terms of the attacking will be tested for sure against Leinster. But it'll be interesting to see from a Leinster team perspective here. Will we see Jason Jenkins probably feature against Munster on Saturday night?
Yeah. I mean, he certainly will. He's been tearing up trees already this season. And it'll be an interesting kind of subplot, won't it, in the game itself. And then we're kind of trying to figure out, well, will this be the final opportunity really before the autumn internationals for Leinster to field some of their guys, their likes of Sexton, and maybe their front row as well. But look, it'll be a different line speed. I think that's the key. That line speed wise, Leinster will be on a different planet than the Bulls, and it's about how do you break that down and how do you go through it. That's really what we're going to have to kind of figure out, and not get bogged down in this just one soft runners like making absolutely no ground. That's what we seem to always do. So we have to just kind of find a different kind of way around Leinster and move them around differently.
Exactly, because Leinster have issued an update on their squad. Caelan Doris, also Kieran Frawley have come through games unscathed, so looks likely that they will kind of feature in some shape or form. Dave Carney expected to return to full training this week. But also you have Luke McGrath, Rhys Ruddock, Ryan Baird will continue to follow return to play protocols. Hugo Keenan, as we'd mentioned, is stepping up his rehab this week from an abdominal and knee injury. Jack Conan, James Ryan, Josh van der Fleer will be assessed further this week. So there might be a bit of a state of flux in terms of the Leinster squad. Some established internationals coupled with some emerging guys as well. So there's going to be nothing soft here from a Munster Rugby perspective, but I think they're going to have to embrace the fixture. I think the management have to embrace it from Munster Rugby and really evaluate where they are, because Leinster are one of the barometers in European rugby, and we need to kind of play without fear and really express ourselves if we can. We kind of showed parts of it in terms of our pack performance. We'll need to kind of see the likes of Malachi Fixtures really kind of come on here a little bit as well, Liam. You know, he was very hardworking against Bulls, but had precious again opportunity given the conditions. So hopefully there is going to be more. I'm looking for a performance again here, Liam. I'm not really going to call in terms of Munster Rugby chances of winning here, but I think really from a Munster Rugby perspective, we really need to kind of continue that performance trend here and build on what was built last week and be competitive. So I don't know if you kind of share those same sentiments.
Yeah, I do agree. I'm not going to call it either, like, really, but it has to be a step up from last week. I mean, it would be devastating if we went and we shipped 50 points and we're back to square one after last week. But I believe that there's more optimism in Munster squad now, you know? I mean, to bonus point a serious team at home means that it's in them. You know, it's definitely capable. Performances are capable of being upped again. And we just need to make sure that I suppose also very important that we take opportunities. I think we always seem to have an awful lot of ball, even against Leinster. We actually have an awful lot of possession. Now, whether it's that Leinster sometimes just let us have possession, quite frankly, and they fan out and say, you know, guys, come along, you know, see what you can do. But the key is to take our try scoring opportunities against Leinster.
Yeah, no, I mean, historically that has been the case, particularly Leinster really trusting their defence against Munster, and Munster going very laterally at times. So really this week, hopefully the key is, you know, we have our supporting runners. We've good, quick ruck ball, easier said than done against Leinster Rugby. I think they're just going to have to play what's in front of them here, Munster, a little bit, but also trying to get Fekitoa involved along with Dan Goggin as well. But I had a very prominent game against Bulls last weekend. Did run for 40 metres. So, yeah, I think for Munster, I think the sense of relief is there, isn't it, for all to see, particularly after the Lockman try. You could see the confidence restored somewhat to all the players. You can see the celebration. You can see smile on faces, where it hasn't been the case earlier on in the season. So hopefully it is a turning point for Munster Rugby that they can build and, as I say, be competitive at least. This weekend against Leinster Rugby, because I would imagine Johnny Sexton will be looking for some game time against Munster ahead of Glasgow Warriors. He may be rested for that one ahead of the November Test match series. So, look, hopefully it's a good competitive game, but I suppose from a Connacht Rugby's perspective here, Liam, you know, an awful lot of hard work. There was an awful lot of good moments, but I suppose cohesion issues here, particularly in that 22 of Leinster really were exposed. You know, they were competitive throughout, I thought. But Josh van der Fleer, you know, against O'Reilly, complete mismatch, setting up Foley's try, and then right at the end, you know, there was an awful lot of inaccuracy in kicking and open play. I can think of O'Reilly's pass to Hansen as well. John Porter thought was the only realistic threat for Connacht. So they have a crunch game on Friday night against the Scarlets. I mean, we talked off air here, Liam. Round 6, there's an awful lot of games here where the vanquished maybe looking at a very long season in the URC.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like a 6-pointer, isn't it? The Connacht game against the Scarlets. The two teams almost bottom of the table, just separate, just below them. And yeah, it's game defining, like, you know. So the team that loses probably is pretty much out of the top 8 for the season. And it's going to be competitive though. It's going to be interesting, I must say. It's going to be absolutely like backs against the wall effort. And Connacht, they're playing for their season. They still have players in the likes of Porch and Hansen that really can really do damage, give them good ball. So that back row has got to really step up.
Completely agree. All the good vibes here against Munster Rugby and the well-deserved win, I think, weren't really diluted. I think there was genuine disappointment that Leinster did hold Connacht scoreless, but there was an awful lot of good things to see, particularly in the set piece. An awful lot of Connacht fans that I've spoken to here in Galway after the game are really impressed by the line-out at the moment, particularly the defensive line-out. With the likes of Murray, Thornbury, there's been massive disruption there. You've seen it against Munster. Now Leinster, their lineup really did malfunction and had issues. So there is a weapon there for Connacht to really kind of build upon. But I suppose it's unexpectedly their kind of maybe attacking cohesion has been a little bit off, which has been very surprising. I suppose the Munster game was very kind of patchy. Leinster, they did provide, no opportunities for Connacht really to express themselves with quick ruck ball. But yeah, it's going to be that cohesion issue here for Connacht. Can they get it right for the Scarlets games? Because Scarlets are coming in, secured their first win of the season against Ebury at home, 36-12 last weekend in round 5, apologies. So I think from that perspective, Connacht know what the task is. Scarlets will be confident coming over. But as we say, I think whoever loses this, it's kind of looking like maybe a Challenge Cup coming, and it's hard to say that after round 6, but there's an awful lot of gaps opening up here, particularly when you see the likes of the Leinsters, the Ulsters, the Stormers. There's a top 4 here that potentially could be up and away, and then there could be kind of a frantic fight for a few playoff spots come the end of the season here, Liam.
Already those three teams are just pretty out on their own. There is now after that, right on the table, there is only a 6-7 points separating teams at the moment, so it's still doable. That's the point. It's still doable, but you don't want to get beyond that. You don't want to get 12, 14 points. Then you're just you're gone. So
exactly.
All the teams have again, it's something to play for. The likes of Cardiff have something to play for. Sharks, Ulster, Lions, Glasgow, just cracking teams. Cracking games. I have to say, maybe I'm biased, but way more interesting than the Premiership at the moment.
Absolutely, no. And I mean, Liam, you watched the Lions Ulster game, another potential game of the season. Particularly in South Africa there last weekend. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, I thought it was a phenomenal win for Ulster considering the form that the Lions have been in.
Yeah, and it's still an incredible achievement, to win in South Africa, and the Lions have been in really good form. We had Balakoum got a try after I think a minute or something, just typical him. And then it was mix and match. It was they got a few tries. Rob Little, nice little run-in try. Herring try from a maul. But the thing was, I guess, for Ulster, if we're being pernickety, they were ahead by something like 13, 14 points and 20 minutes to go. And the last few tries were actually scored. Well, 3 tries, I suppose, were scored by the Lions to bring it up to almost level. So that's maybe something that Ulster have to look at. But again, you have to always take into account, you're playing in Ellis Park, you're playing at altitude. These things can happen in the last 20 minutes of a game. But an excellent, win for Ulster. And all their big players like Balakoum, McCluskey, Herring were all prominent.
Exactly. I mean, probably a harsh critique there, but I think that might be a trend. If that's a trend to continue here, Liam, particularly that last 20 minutes performance from Ulster. I think it was pinpointed last season a little bit, where Ulster did come out of games a little bit and did allow opposition to score tries. I'm just thinking of the Toulouse game, for instance, as well, where, closing stages, keep them out, defensively be strong, and couldn't. So I think from that perspective, maybe Dan McFarlane's definitely probably looking at that and looking to see if there's a response, particularly with the Sharks, because there's a great rivalry between the Sharks and Ulster now. And I mean, it'll be, I think, one of the quality games in week 6, and geez, if Ulster could get a result down in Sharks, my God, I mean, the season really does open up for Ulster pretty much. Not just from an Ireland Shield perspective, but also probably looking at a top 2 playoff seeding. I mean, so early on in the season, but I mean, these are the games that will define the playoff picture come May.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they'll be deserving of it, won't they? If they get the 2 wins in South Africa, because I don't think too many teams this season are gonna even get close to that. Probably the Sharks will be even got a step up though for Ulster as well, and it's a bet. Second game back as well, and this will be actually again probably for the Sharks their final hit out for all their Springbok players before they board the plane as well. So there's a lot riding for them as well, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an absolutely cracking game. All the games Ulster seem to play in down there in South Africa are just very, very open flowing games.
Exactly. No, I think that'll be phenomenal. And even up in the Northern Hemisphere, I think there's some quality games here, particularly like the Cardiff Rugby Stormers. Like, Cardiff have picked up a bit of form in recent weeks, and against the Stormers, who we know are very capable of playing great expansive rugby when they're allowed to, I think that could be a quality game, particularly in the Cardiff Arms at 7:35 on Saturday. Looking at the Lions, Glasgow Warriors, that could be another kind of game. 2 teams that do like to offload the ball. Another high-scoring game. Benetton and Bulls. I think this is a key game for Benetton, Liam. They started the season so well, but there has been a blip. Definitely last week was a bit of a wake-up call. And with the Bulls now kind of smarting from 2 losses in a row to Glasgow and Munster, they will not want to be completing a trip to the Northern Hemisphere with another loss to their name. So I think Benetton have it all to do there. And then you have the local Welsh derby between the Dragons and Ospreys on Sunday, the 23rd of October as well. Again, that's another must-win game for both teams here if they want to be realistically in the punt for playoffs. And again, this is round 6. But again, as we said, there's manageable gaps at the moment. But after round 6, they could be getting to the point where you're looking for results elsewhere, which after round 6 is not advantageous. I suppose, Liam, before we conclude here, we did speak at length about the Wasps administration. It had broke when we were speaking on this podcast. News has now confirmed that Wasps have been, put into administration. Players and staff, loyal players and staff, have been made redundant. And thoughts and prayers with John Ryan and his family that he secures a professional contract as soon as possible, really. But there has been other murmurings here. We had mentioned, and you mentioned, Liam, last week, that maybe other clubs might be on the defensive a little bit in terms of their financial affairs. And so it's proved, particularly in Bristol Bears and also London Irish, having to come out vehemently to refute any allegations of a potential merger with Wasps.
Yeah, and Bristol's Bears had to make a statement to their fans outlining, I suppose, the catastrophic losses that is going to incur them from losing 2 home games this season in the league. And to be honest, it also indicates that they're kind of saying to their fans that we are in financial trouble. That's effectively what it's saying to me. And then, of course, we had London Irish rumour London Irish were going to merge with Wasps. That hasn't happened. There was also going to be a possible takeover of Wasps to try and keep them going, but that's fell by the board. So we've had James Haskell, we've had others like really say that other clubs, the domino effect is going to actually end up as well. So it's worrying times.
It's very worrying times for any professional player in the Gallagher Premiership right now, because as we highlighted this last week on the podcast, Liam, just in terms of the loss of earnings for the remaining clubs in the Gallagher Premiership, to suddenly now no longer have Worcester Warriors and also Wasps in your schedule at home, and particularly at lucrative times of the year, particularly at Christmas, or particularly leading up to a Six Nations where interest is, really there for rugby union. I'm just thinking of Northampton again from Munster Warriors. Wasps always had that connection with Harlequins, Harrisons. Again, these kind of key fixtures. It really does kind of paint a very gloomy picture for the Gallagher Premiership. And again, I do ask the question in terms of what the RFU have been doing in the last year and a half, particularly during the pandemic. There was furlough schemes. Surely the 35 million, particularly the move from Coventry to Wasps, clearly didn't work. 35 million owed to bondholders is just unrealistic, unsustainable for rugby union. It might fly in terms of an English Premiership team to hold those sort of debts, but again, where is the governance? I think the RFU, as a matter of urgency, should be reaching out to all the other Gallagher Premiership clubs and really kind of identifying if there is other warning signs here that they can mitigate here. So, yeah, it's a very sorry sight and state for Gallagher Premiership, English rugby in general, because I think for quite a few of these players, they may have to move abroad to get game time. So it's very, it's worrying. I'd say it's worrying for Eddie Jones as well, I would say, given an awful lot of the Wasps players, particularly like Joe Launchbury's, guys at that kind of stature, they're not going to be playing rugby now for a little bit. So it's worrying times. I think very worrying times for everyone involved.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Mark, in terms of where they'll be playing, it's they'll be like medical jokers. They will get probably short-term 6-month contracts, all right, in France, which makes them unavailable to England. Or of course, they might go to Japan as well. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to be worrying for Eddie Jones as well.
Exactly. Going into a November Test series, he'll want his English players on top physical condition with sufficient game minutes. That hasn't been happening for the Wasps team for a few weeks now. So, yeah, it's worrying signs, and all we can do is hope that even the loyal staff here in Wasps and even Munster Warriors, from ticket office to maintenance to groundskeepers, the backroom staff here, that they all get looked after here, Liam. I think that's imperative. We've talked about the players an awful lot in this podcast, but it's the loyal people here, the people working in the cafeteria, those people that have served 20, 30 years with these rugby clubs, and now to be told that they're out of a job. I think, coming into the Christmas period, hearts go out for them, and hopefully they can all be sorted and can get alternative employment soon. All good. Liam, we might leave it there on a somber note, but some positive musings from Munster Rugby. Looking forward to the Viva Stadium on Saturday. Maybe we can have a reflection in terms of round 6 next week. Run the rule over that ahead of the final games of this block of fixtures on the URC, and also maybe looking ahead to maybe some of the other test match nations in terms of their November test match series squad selections. Until then, Liam, thanks very much.
Okay, Mark, thanks. See you next week. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.